Formally, I want to introduce myself as Dana Zivkovich. I started the Friendly Lawyers Association. Its purpose is to provide connections or facilitate connections between solo attorneys and small firm attorneys. We also provide resources for law practice management and mental health and wellness. So these webinars are one of the ways that we try to deliver good content that can help attorneys such as yourself run your practice or feel better about running your practice, because we know how stressful and difficult that could be when everything falls on your own shoulders. So today's topic is stress and time management for busy attorneys. And it appears that some of our registrants are so busy they're coming in a little bit late. So that's why we are starting this show a little bit late. We waited a few minutes to give people time to come in. So if you're just now joining us, thanks for joining. We're about to get started. I have Amy Gardner, CEO of Apochromatik. Did I say that right, Amy? Okay, great. And she's going to help talk to us about why it's important that we kind of gauge our stress levels and what to do about it. So I'm not going to take too much time to turn over the reins, but I will be here to be Amy's co-pilot in this. And I just want to let everybody know that we have a chat feature in the webinar, and we're going to try to encourage your participation, because we find that it is a better experience for everyone if you can share your thoughts and your questions as well, and respond to our questions or our surveys through that chat function. So with that, I'm going to hopefully be able to maximize. Aha, here we go. And right. Now you've got the floor.
Good deal. All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Dana. I really appreciate your having me back again today. And thanks to everybody who made the time to join us this afternoon. Let's see. All right. We're going to talk about stress and time management for busy lawyers, which I realize is pretty redundant. But that's what we're going to be talking about today. And let's see if this wants to work. Okay, so first we wanted to start with a couple of polls. And I don't know if Dana, if you start those, or if I should. Okay.
Sure, I'll go ahead, and you can go ahead and read them out loud, and they'll be coming up in the chat box for everyone.
Okay, so we're going to have you answer 3 different questions total. The first one is, we'd love for you to rank your current work and life stress level. So take both things into account. Your options range from totally relaxed most of the time, to feeling good but maybe negligible stress bubbles into your life, to semi-stressed, episodic, comes and goes, stressed regularly, feels manageable but it's a fine line, all the way up to number 5, which is totally stressed, overwhelmed, chronic stress. If you could share honestly, and these are anonymous, so no worries there.
And while we're giving them a minute to fill out the poll, have you found with your clients that stress levels have changed recently, maybe in reaction to all the things that have been going on this year? Or
for sure. I think it's funny. I have clients all over the country, and the vast majority of my one-on-one coaching clients, and then our clients who are small group masterminds, are attorneys. We do have some programs that are open to non-attorneys too, but I spend most of my time working with attorneys. And people who told me, like, I have a client who lives on a horse farm, and she was telling me in April that she was loving this. She felt guilty for being so happy during the pandemic. She said that she was having an idyllic life. That was her phrase in April. And she sent me an email over the weekend that was like, I would like to kick myself for saying that. This is so stressful. Like, what went from tolerating to now is her stress went from tolerating to now super duper stressed. So even I think people who may have not had such a hard time in the beginning of all of this may be having a harder time now. And I think I was telling you, Dana, that yesterday I watched a webinar where a Cook County State Court, or a Cook County Family Court judge, was saying that she had seen something that on any given day, normally about 20% of U.S. Adults report that they are depressed, and that right now those numbers are more like 50%. And that's certainly what I've been seeing working with my clients as well, is that people seem to be having
Yeah,
a much
so
harder time now.
it's definitely probably something that's being felt across the board.
Yep.
Now I'm going to end this poll. Did you want me to go ahead and move on to the next one?
Sure,
it looks
sure.
like
So
we
100%
have,
of people, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, just what you were going to say. Looks like 100% of people right now are feeling smack dab in the middle, a number 3 on the rank.
Yep. Which is definitely better than it could be. So that's good.
Okay, and you want me to go right into the next one?
Sure.
Okay.
The next one invites you to list the primary thing causing your stress right now. And so we have a range there of inequalities in our society that are really coming to the forefront right now in a way that they haven't in a long time. Safety issues, the economy, including as it relates to your practice, job security of a loved one, COVID-19, your health of a loved one, or childcare. And I kind of feel like we almost should have an all of the above option, but
yeah. Well, I'm sure everybody can feel some stress as related to these subjects to some degree if it applies to you, but identifying that primary stressor is probably going to be more helpful to figure out, what is kind of taking over at this point. And just a note on the option for inequalities. Could you just clarify that a little bit, just so that we know exactly what you're looking for?
Sure. So there, what I was really thinking about is I have seen this with some of my clients who are saying, and I should say clients of all different racial backgrounds, have indicated that this is the protests and the issues coming to the forefront have really been raising their stress level. So one client who's a person of color said she found it really traumatic every time she turned on the news to see a Black man being murdered in front of her eyes. And she felt like that was really adding to her stress level. While one of my neighbors who is white said that she was feeling a lot of stress right now about all the protests in Chicago, because she was feeling stressed that she wasn't joining the protests because she's so afraid of the coronavirus that she didn't want to join. So I think it's multifaceted, but I know that that's something that's causing stress for a lot of people, both for the underlying issues and then also for the things that are related to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And for me personally, right now I'd say my primary stressor is out of these choices, the economy as it relates to my practice, but I'm going to kind of expand that to mean how my practice has had to change as a result of, our social distancing and Zoom calls being required for court. All of those new changes recently are causing me a little bit of stress because we are redoing systems, particularly with court, because they just opened up for us. And they're not quite, they don't have the tweaks worked out, and then there's always that transition time that's a little bit more stressful than normal. So I'm going to end this poll. It looks like that the economy is the big winner out of those choices. And there's one more poll.
There you go. Yep. The last one is, what are you most interested in between time management, stress management, both equally, or just, hiding from your kids and getting an hour of Celia? And no shame with any of these. Just curious to see what people think.
Yeah, time management is always a challenge for me. And I often hear that from a lot of the other members in the Friendly Lawyers group. I think that goes hand in hand because a lot of times as a very small firm or a solo practitioner, you are doing so many different things at once. And time, my favorite line about time management is that time is finite, so everyone has the same amount of time. And it's interesting and hopeful to me that I can see other people get so much more done, because to me that means opportunity. So the idea that time is finite is something that I say to myself, and then I look at it as a workable problem. So the time management piece of your presentation is really interesting to me. Looks like we have support for that. The poll results are showing that time management is what people are interested in.
Okay, good deal. And it looks like, so one person said, sent me a message that said, of the things that's causing them stress, for them it's really time demands, too much work, too short of time frames, client demands, unrealistic expectations. So that's really helpful to know, because we have a hack that we'll talk about that's helpful. And we'll get there. Oh, and they said Inner Calm by Arbonne has really helped with stress.
Inner Calm by Arbonne or Arbonne. I'm not sure what that is. Have you ever heard of that?
I wonder if that's one of those sprays. I just had a conversation with a client about these sprays that are supposed to help calm you down. I wonder if that's what it is. So maybe if the person who shared that privately would give us a little more detail. But in the meantime, so it sounds like it looks like time management is the top interest. So we'll talk about stress management, because that's obviously super important, and particularly for our CLE credits. And it's such an important issue in the legal industry because of what we've seen stress do to so many lawyers. And then we'll shift to time management. So that's really helpful. Thank you all for sharing that. With that, we'll hop back to the slides. There we go. All right. So I want to start with sort of as a base understanding that as we're talking about all of this, I kept thinking about this quote. The New York Times has done a lot of work, a lot of pieces about particularly what women and parents of small children have been going through since March, and what it's doing to people trying to juggle their career and 100% childcare. And this therapist was interviewed in one of the articles I read, and he said, what everyone is doing is impossible and crazy. So if nothing else from today, I want you to remember that what we're all trying to do is impossible and crazy. And that even if you do not, I don't have small children at home or anything like that, and it is still just a crazy situation that we're finding ourselves in. So I encourage you to give yourself some grace. If you remember nothing else from this, remember that this is an impossible and crazy situation, and so you should really cut yourself some slack. So let's talk, though, about what all this means. As Dana said, I'm Amy Gardner. I co-founded Apochromatik 4 years ago. I am now a certified career coach, and I work with attorneys on developing their careers or transitioning to another role. I am a recovering lawyer. I spent a long time at Skadden, Chicago as a litigation associate, and then was at Ungardy and Harris first as an associate and then a partner. Before moving into the nonprofit sphere, I was at the University of Chicago Law School as a dean of students for about 6 years, and a lot of what I did was focused around professionalism and leadership training for law students. I then moved from there into working for the American Constitution Society remotely. So I've been working remotely actually since 2016. So I have a lot of experience with all of this. And we started Apochromatik 4 years ago, and I work one-on-one with attorneys on growing their book of business, on advancing their career or transitioning. And then we also have small group masterminds for attorneys, with our next one starting right after Labor Day, where we work with small groups of attorneys for a series of months on their career together. And we also do some other career-related services like a resume service and career rebound boot camps, 2-week boot camps for folks who've just lost their jobs or want to prepare in a hurry to leave their role. And then we also do online courses, including one on executive presence. So that's my background. I should add, though, that my interest in stress actually started because when I was in high school, I was having really severe stomach problems, and eventually had a whole sequence of tests. And I mean, these were bad enough that I would be driving home from someplace and would have to pull over on the side of the road because I'd be doubled over. I couldn't sit up because the pain was so bad. And it turned out that at the ripe old age of 17, I was having all these stomach problems due to stress. So not being necessarily the sharpest knife in the drawer, after several rounds of having to do a soft, bland food diet for 6 weeks or 8 weeks at a time, a whole sequence of medicine and more testing, finally learned that I had to get better at managing stress. And really the best way I found to manage stress is to get better at managing my time. And so that
makes sense.
Why I'm so passionate about this now. Yeah. And also, I should say, too, that throughout my career, and I've worked with people who've suffered with some of the problems that we're going to talk about. And so I've seen up close what some of these issues can do to people in the legal profession and to law students. So that's also part of why I'm so passionate about this. We want to make sure we address the Illinois Rules of Professional Conduct, because I think I've certainly had attorneys say this to me. I now serve on the Committee on Character and Fitness, and more than once I've been interviewing a candidate who was flagged for an issue. And I think people sometimes get the impression that the Illinois bar only cares about attorneys and their backgrounds and things to make life difficult. But in fact, we really care about these issues because they matter to representation of clients beyond caring about attorneys as individuals. Rule 1.16 actually says that you need to represent a client and can't withdraw unless there are some certain circumstances met. And one of those is the lawyer's physical or mental condition materially impairs the lawyer's ability to represent the client. And it also, I'm having trouble seeing the rest of the slide because of the pictures. Dina, can you?
Oh, sure. Pop us up there.
Thank you. All right. So, no, perfect. It also says in the comment that a lawyer should not accept representation unless it can be performed competently, promptly, and without improper conflict of interest into completion. So right there in the rules, we're hearing that you really shouldn't be taking a client unless you have the time and capacity to represent them to your full ability. And you shouldn't be taking the client if you are suffering with a physical or mental condition that's going to impair your ability to represent them.
And sometimes that is not an easy thing to admit because like all of us, we've got these businesses and we've got our own bills and we're trying to do our best. And do you find that when you've reviewed any cases under that rule, that is the sort of situation? You have an attorney in front of you who was really making a determination that they were competent and they were trying to do their best, but maybe those circumstances surrounding that attorney's life or office life proved otherwise. Is that the case in real life, how it plays out?
So I'm on the Character and Fitness Committee, which the Character and Fitness Committee that reviews applicants to the bar. So I don't have experience with this from that standpoint.
I see.
But I can tell you from what I know from reading the bar magazine that I get every quarter, is that this really can be an issue where particularly people who are suffering with mental health issues may take on cases that they're just not able to handle or shouldn't be taking on. And then you really get worried about, you're of course worried about the attorney, but you're worried about the client's rights and whether they're going to be protected, and you can't be a zealous advocate if you're really suffering. And I think this is what this rule is really trying to get at.
And something that might help in that regard is perhaps you're in a place that you're feeling available and competent to help this client at this moment. But cases can last a long time and things can happen to your life in the meantime. And I'm not sure that a lot of attorneys have put in place the attorney surrogate or contingency plan, which if you take the time to set that up, you might feel more relaxed about having a backup if there becomes a circumstance in your life where you have to say, okay, I have to just step aside for a moment. I'm approaching a danger zone regarding this rule. I have someone that I can rely on to step in. So that's something to think about as well with regard to that rule, is just whether you're prepared if you need to step away.
That's such a good point. And one of the things we'll talk about shortly too is how many resources there are at Illinois. And I think remembering that you have these resources, you have confidential resources, and if you find yourself in this jam, then there are, you can contact LAP and the Legal Lawyer Assistance Program, and they will help you with all of this because they really want to prevent you from committing malpractice. Essentially, they want to prevent you from getting in trouble for violating the rules, and they will step in and help in situations.
Yeah, so that's worth repeating, because even though we've heard about LAP probably 1,000 times, it's always worth repeating that, oh yeah, there's LAP, because they're not usually top of mind.
Yeah.
Okay, and just
knowing somebody will help you.
Yeah. Just a quick note for anybody who did not have time to press the link for the materials. We do have inside the webinar here, you can click on the little button that says Files, and you'll see these rules available in PDF that you can download to your system if you wanted to do that right away.
And those are the full rules, not just the edited version, so you can see the whole thing. So a second rule that we wanted to bring your attention to is 1.3, which talks about diligence. And it seems so basic when you just read the rule. A lawyer shall act with reasonable diligence and promptness in representing a client. And then when you go to the comments, though, I have to admit, so number 3 is my favorite. Perhaps no professional shortcoming is more widely resented than procrastination. A client's interests often can be adversely affected by the passage of time or changing conditions. In extreme instances, as when a lawyer overlooks a statute of limitations, the client's legal position may be destroyed. Even when the client's interests are not affected in substance, however, unreasonable delay can cause a client needless anxiety and undermine confidence in the lawyer's trustworthiness. Now, procrastination is something that a lot of lawyers struggle with, but right here in the rules, it's telling you, look, this is hurting the legal profession, it's hurting your clients, and it is widely resented if you're procrastinating. So that's why I want to.
Yeah, and I think everybody can relate to that feeling, certainly.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about what stress can do, particularly to lawyers. So anxiety is defined as persistent worrying out of proportion to the impact of events. And I know that that can be hard to think about in this situation where we're in a global pandemic, and it's hard to know what's in proportion or not in proportion. But in a normal time period, 20% of lawyers report suffering from anxiety. In one 2020 survey of 3,800 lawyers, though, it was actually 64% of lawyers who said that they suffer from anxiety. And the national average for the adult population is more like 18 to 20%. So regardless of the survey you're looking at, the number of lawyers suffering with anxiety is really out of whack from the rest of the population. So then lawyers and depression is a topic we hear a lot about, defining depression as a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Now, 28%, if you joined Beth for her session on the National Task Force report on lawyer well-being, that report has a statistic that 28% of lawyers report that they're depressed. That number in 2016 is up from 19% of lawyers in 1990 and 3 to 9% of the general population reporting that they feel depressed. We're all aware that lawyers and suicide is an important issue. 11.5% of lawyers report suicidal thoughts versus 3.5% of the general population. When it comes to lawyers and substance abuse, 21% of lawyers report levels of alcohol use considered problem drinking versus 12% of other highly educated professionals. In that 2020 survey of 3,800 lawyers, just over 10% self-reported an alcohol problem. In that same 2020 survey, 3% report having a drug problem. And I think what's really astounding with both of those is that that's what people are self-reporting. So if 3% are self-reporting, we could guess it's higher. And 1/3 of lawyers facing formal disciplinary charges are identified as suffering from an addiction or mental illness. This is also something that I just really think is horrifying. When asked, do you think the profession has a negative effect on your mental health over time? 74% of those 38 attorneys surveyed in 2020 said yes. And we know from looking at numbers of law students that it does not necessarily get better as people go through law school and as they enter the practice of law. So that's to sort of frame the issue of why it's so important and why we talk so often about mental health and lawyers, substance abuse and lawyers. Let's turn to some stress in our own lives and what we can actually do about it. So I think it's important to keep in mind that stress can be external, so caused by the environment, social situations, pandemics, or it can be internal when it's caused by an illness or a medical procedure. So obviously some of this is outside our control. I would invite you, though, to share how stress affects you.
Yeah, so we're going to take a minute.
Figure that in the chat.
We're going to take a minute to let you describe how stress impacts you. And we're not going to try to interrupt your thought process because we'd like you to help us understand how it personally affects you. Amy, does your minute use your timer countdown? Oh, I can't hear you.
So it does, but I don't think it works through Webinar Jam. So I just set my stopwatch on my thing. So
okay, no problem.
45 seconds left.
Well, I'll verbalize. For me, stress tends to, well, I should say, if I don't have any stress, then I have stress that I don't have stress. And I wonder if anybody can relate to that feeling, because the truth of the matter is that I'm so accustomed to having some stress that if I don't have any stress, something feels wrong. And I would identify that some level of stress that is keeping me responsive and sharp is part of my life that I've accepted. So once stress expands or grows beyond that line, what starts happening are the typical negative effects that you can hear from others. Primarily maybe sleep deprivation, I'm having trouble getting things off my mind. I start to possibly not be able to keep track of everything. So then if problems occur, that's making my stress exponential. So those are some of the things that will affect me. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
Now I can.
All right. One person said it's in a private message and said, I get knots in my stomach. I want to drink, which I refuse to allow myself to do until the evening when I've left my practice. I feel frozen in place. And those are all pretty common reactions to stress. I was in, so I mentioned that we run small group masterminds for attorneys. I'm actually in a mastermind as well that I'm a member of. And when we had our meeting this week, one of the people in my mastermind group was talking about that he had to realize that he deserves to have downtime, because for so long he thought, if I'm not stressed out, I must be doing something wrong. And if I'm not working all the time, I'm not working as hard as I can to make my business work. And so there's something wrong there. And he had to realize that he actually is worthy of being not stressed for part of each week, and that can be a real adjustment. One person said, I fully understand how lawyers resort to substance abuse. I'm such a disciplined individual, I refuse to allow myself to resort to it. And we've seen this time and again, that people who are in really high stress professions like law, and of course there's genetic predisposition, there are all kinds of other issues, but that substance abuse can be a real issue for lawyers. So let's hop back to the slides and talk about what you can do about it. So here are some other effects of stress, and we mentioned some of these. So difficulty concentrating, feeling helpless, difficulty making decisions, depression, feeling hopeless, irritability, anger, difficulty sleeping, difficulty getting up in the morning. And then social and behavioral effects of stress can include increased use of alcohol and use of drugs, change in appetite, withdrawal from friends and family, aggression, temper, outbursts, and behavioral excesses. And then some physiological effects: sleep difficulties, headaches, muscle tension, appetite and GI issues, fatigue, and feeling listless. So
and GI, just to clarify, is like is that gastrointestinal? Okay.
Yeah, like stomach issues, things like that.
Okay.
All right. So there are positive effects of stress, though, and it's Friday afternoon. We don't want to be complete downers. So I wonder if anybody might share in the chat any positive effects, or Dana, if you want to share any positive effects you've had of stress. The idea here is that two different people can react differently to the same stress. And some of that is based on what resources we're bringing to bear. So if somebody comes up to you and slaps you across the face when you've had 9 hours of sleep and you've worked out recently, you've had a good breakfast, you are going to have probably a different reaction than if you have had 4 hours of sleep and you're not sure how you're going to make payroll today. And if you haven't worked out in 2 months and have been living on Diet Dr. Pepper and Bugles. So some of it depends upon your stores, and some of it also depends upon your skillfulness. So does anybody have any positive effects of stress that you want to share?
Okay, and just to kind of clarify, positive effects of bad stress or positive effects of good stress?
Well, so if you assume that stress can go either way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I might see someone get hit by a car and react to go, it's going to motivate me to go do CPR and save them. And other people might just freeze in horror. So kind of any situation, even the bad situation of seeing someone be hit by a car, can result in good things. I might feel invigorated because I just saved someone's life by doing CPR.
I see.
So, like for me, for example, if I am more stressed, I get more done. And I look back at certain times in my life and think, how did I do all that at once? And then there are other times in my life where I think, like, what was I doing?
And I share that. And I think others can relate to that as well as a positive effect, that sometimes the stress, gets you to move.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like if a bear attacks you in the woods, right? All of a sudden you might be a much better tree climber than you had thought when you woke up that morning. All right. It looks like folks haven't shared any, so I'll keep an eye on the chat, but we should probably
go
back into the slides. Okay. So here are some realistic strategies to help you manage stress. And I want to say I have a lot of admiration for people who have 2-hour morning routines where they do all the things that we read about in O Magazine and that we know in the back of our heads they would be great if we did. I am not one of the people who can have a 2-hour routine at this season of my life. So these are some realistic strategies, and more power to you if you can do, the Cadillac version. This is more the how are we going to get through the day with our sanity intact version. So one thing that I think is really helpful is daily fresh air. That might be, in my case, I've been spending a lot of time on our balcony since March. Another thing that I think is really helpful can be having routines, which are so important now, to have some normalcy and have some predictability in your life. Taking time to be creative. I have a friend who has started learning and singing a new song with her, accompanying herself on her ukulele and singing a new song every day and recording it. And she did this for 100 days during the pandemic as a way to really improve her ukulele skills and her willingness to sing on camera. I also have another friend who's doing a painting class right now over Zoom. So find time to be creative. Journaling. I used to try to do a journal with like no prompts, and that was a disaster. So now I do the full focus journal from Michael Hyatt, which has just 8 questions that you answer. And you could spend 20 minutes on it, or you could also get through it in 5 minutes, depending on how much time you have. Spending time with friends and family, even that's, Zoom dinner parties on Saturday night, whatever it is, making time for that. Exercising. We all know that makes a huge difference. But it's important to actually make it a priority. Taking care of your body in other ways, as I mentioned, not living on Bugles and Diet Dr. Pepper. Acknowledging and addressing your anxieties where you can. And I think that's so important. I think we really do ourselves and the people around us a disservice when everything is just fine. How are you? I'm fine. And actually being honest with ourselves and those around us can be more helpful.
Yeah, maybe people should ask themselves every day, how are you? You're having your morning coffee or you're having your morning routine. I like that you brought that up. Self-reflect. How are you? How are you doing? It's almost like having a conversation with yourself, but be open with yourself and reflect a little bit.
We use a feelings wheel that I think it has, I want to say 60. So it's divided up into circles instead of just I'm angry. say, it breaks down like what is really angry. Is that frustration? Is that feeling stuck? Whatever it is.
Yeah,
You're
like
in control.
identifying a more detailed source of the anger,
Mm-hmm.
right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a great tool. It's a great tool if you're for your family. If you're, how are you today? If the teenagers are always saying fine, but also for you to get in touch with how you're feeling. And the more you can get in touch with your own feelings, then the more that helps your empathy, which helps you relate to clients, which helps your legal practice. So it really can make a big difference. And then, so I mentioned calling on your village and then trying to institute a break between work and home. And obviously, that is much harder than it's ever been. But a little effort to do that, even if it's just closing your laptop and putting it in a drawer, if your laptop is on the kitchen table, putting it away when it comes to be dinner time and trying to make that clear delineation. So those are some strategies that can be helpful. A few more. Plan ahead from.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Plan ahead for major changes and events to avoid avoidable stress. So I'll talk about that in the time management, but one of the things that I do with my spouse is we have a weekly calendar meeting where we go through the next 2 weeks, and that just helps us avoid the wait a minute, I thought you were going to do that situation and some of the last minute scramble. Another one is accept your limitations and get help. I think we often feel as lawyers that we can do anything, and we can, but that doesn't mean that we should. And just recognizing this is insane. Remember, this goes back to this is crazy and impossible, and getting help. Prioritize, recognizing that perhaps the pajamas don't really have to be folded, but yet the brief does need to be proofread. Figuring out what really matters. Practicing mindfulness and meditating is so helpful. But I know Beth already talked about that a couple weeks ago, so I won't belabor that. Utilizing mental health resources available to you. We mentioned LAP. You might also have like an employee assistance program, an option like that. There are a bazillion therapists in Chicago and in the area who work with lawyers. Happy to connect you with one if that might also be helpful.
Or sometimes even through your medical insurance, you might have that as a benefit. Sometimes people don't realize that.
Yep, and churches too. Often ministers or priests or those folks are happy to talk with you and connect you if you need another resource. But also houses of worship have a lot of resources too often. Another one is saying no. And I always roll my eyes internally when someone says say no, but I think part of it is because I don't want to do it. And realistically, the best way to avoid being overwhelmed with too much to do is to say no to some of it up front. But that can be easier said than done.
Right.
Another strategy that's so easy but makes such a difference is reframing. So there's all kinds of research that shows that if you just tell yourself you're excited versus anxious, it really does change your brain and the way that you're thinking about it and the chemicals that are being released. And it really makes a difference. So I encourage you the next time you're thinking, oh my God, I'm so stressed out, to think, wow, I'm so lucky that I have so much to do, or I'm so excited about this court hearing today. I can really tell the judge what a disaster opposing counsel is, whatever it is.
Well, also, it sounds kind of like that may relate to self-fulfilling prophecies, where if you're telling yourself something over and over again, you begin to believe it. And it sounds like it's kind of connected to that psychologically. If you have some issue that is causing you anxiety, reframing it, I'm hearing you say, look at it and try to pick out positive pieces that you can then be excited about and refocus on that, right?
Absolutely. I think it, there's a reason that I love Eeyore, but, there's a reason that nothing works out for poor Eeyore, right? You want to think through in advance. And I think as lawyers, we're always looking for when's the other shoe going to drop, and only the paranoid survive kind of thing. But if you can reframe that and tell yourself up front, this is going to be an interesting hearing, instead of, oh my God, they're just going to yell. It can change the way that you show up in the hearing, and it can also change how it goes for you. And then the last point here is to focus on what's within your control, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. So I think we've talked some already about how we're managing stress, and I'm watching the time, so let's skip that one.
Sure.
One more point on this. Speed, this quote from Tony Schwartz, speed is addictive and undermines nearly everything in life that really matters: quality, compassion, depth, creativity, appreciation, and real relationship. So remember that at the same time, we're often thinking, how can I get more done in less time? There are times when it really is better to just slow down because your work product is going to be better, but also the relationships that you're building and the way you're treating people is going to be better. All right, so I wanted to mention these resources and lawyer assistance program in Illinois is not just in Chicago. There's actually 5 offices around the state, so, and several in the Chicago suburbs. So if you are not downtown, there's still plenty of resources, and they have lots of resources online. They've been doing group meetings and things like that online as well. There's also the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing. If you missed Beth's session a couple weeks ago where she took us through that report, there are tons of resources on their website about lawyers and substance abuse and lawyers and mental health. And then the Mindfulness in Law Society is another one that is, so these should be listed on your handout as well, I think. They have some great resources for free meditations for lawyers to do and things like that. So you could check that out. All right, so I mentioned that one way to realistically manage stress is to focus on what's within your control. This is on your worksheet. I encourage you over the weekend to do this. List out your concerns, and then after you've made a list, fill them in. The things you can control go in the center. The things you cannot control go on the outer ring. I actually encourage you to do this with whomever you live with. One of my clients who has 2 little girls did this with them, and they're 8 and 10, and she and her husband did it with the girls, and the girls keep citing it. They actually did it on a whiteboard, and the client was complaining they can't erase the whiteboard because the girls are so into their circles. But whenever they did this, I think in April, and whenever an issue comes up, one of the girls will go over and say, we can control that, this is what we can do, or Daddy, stop complaining about this political issue. That's in some of the things that we cannot control. So I encourage you to do this either on your own, or you could do it with your office staff if people are fussing and wasting time on things they can't control, or with your family. And that's on your worksheet. All right, and one last plea before I move to time management. This is such an issue in the legal profession. I think we often make stress cool, and we need to stop it. So you've probably heard some of these things, all of which I have heard in real life. If you thought law school was stressful, just wait till your first trial. Not helpful. If you're not tired, you're not doing it right. Also not helpful. If you have time for hobbies, you're not doing it right, which is something that I was actually told in a job interview for a position at a law firm. So think about the language that you're saying. Think about the language you're using when you talk with your co-counsel, that you use when you talk to people that you're hiring, people in your office, family members, and stop elevating stress as this cool thing, because it can be really bad for our bodies. And it's just not helpful when we make it cool. All right, with that, that's what we want to talk about for stress. Let's talk about some time management tips. So first, I want to encourage you to get on top of your time. And what I mean by that is to understand where it goes, design how you will spend it, and then reflect on how you've used it. So first way to understand your time is by tracking it. And this is something that I've done just about every quarter since I was in college. I went to a program at this the Study Skills Center because I was a assistant hall director and had to get like certified in some study skills or something. And they told us to fill in a chart planning out our week ahead of time, which made sense. And then they told us to fill in a chart tracking where our time went for the week. And I thought, this is pointless. Why would I do this? And then I did, and realized how helpful it is. I don't know if you're familiar with Laura Vanderkam, but she's done a lot of research on this and how skewed our impressions are of where our time is going. And one of the things that I think is particularly relevant for lawyers is the more hours you think you work, the farther off you are. So if you think you work 45 hours a week, you might be working 37. If you think you're working 55 hours a week, you're probably working more like 40 something, 42, 43. And she has thousands of people who've completed these time surveys to see how far people really are off. But so that's reason one you want to see where your time is going, is just to see how much you actually work, how much do you actually sleep. We always underestimate how much we sleep, it turns out. It's also important, though, to see where you're wasting time. I had a staff of 9 people do this once and discovered that 3 different people checked the mail a total of, I think it was 4 or 5 times a day, which was excessive, period, but particularly given that the mail only came once. So it's a good way to see, where those time wasters are. And for me, each time I do this, I save time because I don't want to have to report or write down silly ways that I'm wasting time. So I encourage you to think about tracking your time to understand where it's going.
Do you have any recommendations for time trackers?
So we have one that anybody who wants it, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to send it to you. The reason I like it is because you just print it out. And so I don't like time trackers on your phone because then, at least for me, I just get sucked back into, various things on my phone. So I think that can be really useful. You can also just do it if you use, I use a planner that breaks out.
So your method is traditional paper and pen.
Yeah, that's what I do. I think, to me, that's the easiest. I've had some clients who do it on spreadsheets, but I like to just write it in, and then I can color it in.
Okay.
Let's see. So that's the first piece of understanding your time. The second is design how you'll spend your time by previewing your week and quarter. What I mean by that is at the end of every quarter, look through your calendar for the next quarter. Figure out what your goals are for the next quarter, and just have a sense of, if you can see it, at least for me, I'm really visual. I need to see, oh, wait, how on earth am I going to do, those 5 things that week? And getting a sense before it becomes a crisis can really help with your time management, but also your stress management. And every Sunday or Friday afternoon, looking at the week ahead and then maybe the next week too, to see what's coming up, scheduling in the time to prepare. So for example, I'm doing a speaking engagement this Tuesday, and I had time scheduled in last Tuesday to prepare for it, because when I did my weekly preview last Sunday, I saw, oh wait, that thing's coming. So one way of getting on top of your time is to think ahead by looking at the week and the quarter ahead. You want to really keep in mind here, if you don't set your own agenda, somebody else will. And a lot of people have said that, but I like that one because it's Melinda Gates's mom who said this. And I think that's so true. All right, so hack number 1, another way to design how you'll spend your time is by conducting a weekly calendar meeting with your teammates at work and one with your teammate at home. This is something that I am always horrified by, how many lawyers don't do a regular calendar meeting with their team. And they'll say things like, oh, it's too much time. Okay, well, it doesn't have to be. And if the 20 minutes that you spend with your team just going through the next week in detail, and then the following week just to get a heads up on things, it will save you plenty of time, and it will just lower the stress level in the office because people have a better sense of what's coming along. I also really recommend that my clients do this with their significant other. Sometimes people include their kids if they're old enough, but just knowing, oh wait, Thursday this person has to be this place, or Wednesday I have to do this evening Zoom, and so you're going to have to figure out dinner. Whatever it is, it just can help lower the stress level and the tension. So I think it's really important. Another way to design how you'll spend your time is by doing a weekend plan. And the way that I prefer to do this, and I used to think this was insane until I read a book by Laura Vanderkam, who also really believes in tracking your time. And her point was that if you're going to have to get the chores done, or things will eventually fall off the face of the earth, you're going to have to get that stuff done. So going into the weekend with a plan means that by being intentional, you are ensuring that in addition to the chore kind of stuff, you have the time for fun. And this usually leads to people rolling their eyes and saying, oh, so you're scheduling fun. Yes, because if you don't, it may not happen. So I usually think of it as Thursday night as chore night, so that as many chores as possible for the weekend can get done. And then that way, Friday night is a block of the weekend. There's Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening, Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening. And that all of a sudden, when you look at your weekend as though it has 8 blocks, it's a much different way of approaching the weekend than just Friday night, we're going to be exhausted and get nothing done. Saturday morning, we're going to wake up and think, oh crap, we got to get stuff done. By Saturday afternoon, we'll realize maybe we should have planned something. And then Sunday, we're dreading going back to work. So I like to have a weekend plan on Wednesday or Thursday that starts Thursday night. And I suggest you give it a try and see what happens. I can't tell you how many emails I get from people afterwards, like a week later. It says, oh, I tried it and it actually worked. So give it a shot. All right. And then another piece of this is to reflect on how you've used your time. I think we're so focused on making the most of our time that we don't stop and celebrate the things that we've done with it. So I encourage you to share, to write on your worksheet and then share in the chat some of the wins that you've had since the stay home time started.
Since our quarantine this past spring. That's what 316 is, March 16th?
Yes, yeah. So, and it can be something personal, it can be something professional. But why don't we give everybody a moment? I'll start my stopwatch. We'll give everybody a minute to think, and you can just share those in the chat. Dana, do you have any wins you want to share?
Yeah. Well, I think that, quarantine has forced us to rethink our schedules and reorganize our time. For me, it's opened up some time because court cases and meetings that were on my calendar, and then I was filling in the leftover time with work I had to get done. Once those court dates all got postponed and those meetings all got postponed, I had this window of opportunity to reorganize the work I needed to get done. And there were some other advantages. Not having to commute somewhere opened up some time. I wasn't spending as much time preparing to meet with a client, and what I mean by preparing is, dressing for court or dressing for a client meeting. So that opened up some time. For me, that all of those openings, it's a win because it allowed me to reflect and take time to, I had more discretionary control over it. So I took time, some of it to catch up on other work. I took time, some of it to reevaluate my own practice, marketing, remote working, how can we shift expenses? And I took some time to increase, the quality time that I either spend with myself or my kids. So those were 3 wins for me.
That's awesome. So one person said, I'm not spending as much money going to networking meetings and paying for parking. Yeah, so saving money is definitely a win during this time for many of us. That's great. For me, one thing that has been different is in the past, we would tend to schedule speaking engagements, or whether paid or, for nonprofits or whatever. We would schedule them, a month or 2 in advance. And so you get in this habit of, oh, well, yeah, sure. But now, we've been hired by clients on much shorter lead times than before, and have been able to pull that off and have come up with ideas and been able to implement them much faster. And so I think it has made us more nimble during this time. I definitely miss being able to travel, and I don't want to minimize the bad things that are going on for people who are sick and people who have died, but for me, I think it's really, there has been a benefit for our business in making us more nimble. And I save a lot of money by not going to Starbucks all the time.
Yeah, and I think there is an underlying message in this exercise, and that is, it's easy to focus on, what's wrong and what's bad. And there could be a real advantage to taking some time to say, well, what is the silver lining in this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when I did my quarterly review and preview at the end of last quarter, I realized that I was thinking, gosh, I've worked so much in the last quarter. I haven't done anything for myself. And then I realized I read 13 books last quarter. So I actually have done something for myself. So I think taking that time to reflect can help you see that if even during this difficult time, you're doing something and you're using the time somehow. Well,
it's a mental release.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. And so again, that's another one that's good to do with your family too, to reflect on what good has come out of this. All right, so hack number 2 is use systems that work for you. And what I mean by that is don't necessarily stress yourself out over trying to figure out how does she do it? How does he do it? Oh, I should do that too. It's great to collect ideas from people, but figure out what works for you and do it. One that I think it has been really helpful for me and for many of my clients is eliminate, automate, delegate, and trade. Now, a lot of people talk about eliminate, automate, delegate. Any time management person, efficiency person, they talk about that a lot. But I add the trade component because I think that can really make a difference. So the process is, ask yourself, you have a task on your to-do list, does this need to be done? If yes, And that's really important because we waste so much time automating things that don't need to be done. So first, can it be eliminated? Does it need to be done? If yes, can it be automated? If yes, then automate it. If it must be done and can't be automated, it be delegated? Then delegate it. If it must be done but can't be automated or delegated, I encourage you to stop and think about whether it can be traded. So, for example, I had an issue not too long ago with my health insurance where they sent me like $1,000 bill, and dealing with it could not be eliminated unless I wanted to pay $1,000 I didn't owe. It could only be automated if I went online and paid $1,000 I didn't owe. I didn't have somebody. I didn't feel like I could give dealing with my health insurance bill to our assistant, so I didn't want to delegate it. So what I did was I traded it with my husband, and he needed to order a bunch of books. And in his mind, because he'd been procrastinating ordering the books, that was a much larger task. And in my mind, dealing with the health insurance bill had been procrastinated so long, it had really grown in time and importance. So we traded tasks. We agreed that by when we would each get them done. And he thought he got a better deal because dealing with health insurance was not something he'd been dreading, and he got it done quickly. And I thought I got a much better deal because buying some books, not a huge deal. So stop and think through, can you automate, eliminate, delegate? And if not, can you trade? And this works in the work context too, where, like, for example, I had some opposing counsel during a big discovery dispute who basically I wanted to strangle, and I did not want to be in the same room as them and watching them deal with documents because they had spilled coffee over a bunch of originals and could not be trusted to be left alone with documents. And so I did not want to babysit opposing counsel for 8 hours. On the other hand, a junior associate was more than happy to sit and watch someone else, not drink coffee around documents. And so we traded off tasks. So it does work too in the work context. So one thing that I often hear from lawyers, though, is when I get to that delegation point, I can't delegate. My assistant is horrible. I can't delegate. This is too complicated. So here's just 3 quick tips for delegation. The first is use technology to help you provide clear instructions. So, for example, instead of sitting and writing out a manual or having to repeat yourself 4 times, consider using Loom or even just your phone to record a quick video, walking the other person through what you need done and how. And then that way, as opposed to face-to-face conversation, they can go back to it. Another way you can do this, I used to supervise the registrar's office at the U of C Law School among my duties. And the registrar would often make videos of himself using the computer so that they would see, then you click here, then you click there, and that would show his staff how to do things. So whether just you talking through the task or you doing the task, consider if you can use technology to leave more clear instructions. The second one is use technology to track delegated work, whether that's through Trello or something like that, or just an Excel spreadsheet, so that you, as one client put it the other day, she's tired of being the family Post-it note. And so you want to take yourself off the task of being the family or the office Post-it note and use some other system to track delegated work. And then create and utilize clear standards for scope of authority, because that's so often we see where people will say, yeah, I need you to figure out what we should do as the firm Christmas gift this year. Well, that may be clear, kind of, but it doesn't tell the person, do you want them to order the gifts? Do you want them to come back with 3 samples? Do you want them to come back with 3 website links? What is it you actually want? So if you can come up with clear standards, level 1 delegation means just go do this thing. Level 5 delegation means, go collect information and bring it back. Whatever it is, you can really help avoid misunderstandings and frustrations with your staff and yourself. So consider those tips if you're delegating. All right, so I want to encourage you to take a moment and think about what could you eliminate, automate, delegate, or trade. And if you could share that in the chat. And I'll share one more example with you that I had a client or a person, actually, I was talking at a women's event in February. And this woman, when I asked people to apply it, got this funny look on her face. And she said she had realized that over the course of the year, she needed to buy about 60 different birthday gifts, and that she was buying 60 individual birthday gifts for children in her kids' classes. And as we were talking, she realized this is stupid. And so she decided she was going to have each kid pick like 3 basic gifts that they liked, and she was going to order 10 of each of them from Amazon. And then the kids were going to have to wrap them and then have them set up. So in basically, half an hour, she was going to finish 60 birthday party gifts without having to, run to the store on the way to a birthday party ever again. So encourage you to think through if there's something you could automate, eliminate, delegate, or trade, and share that in the chat. And I think we have, okay, encourage you to think that through. Hack 3 is to draw boundaries. Again, I know this one you probably heard, but 2 examples I want to encourage you to think about are how you can set your own policies, and then how to have hard conversations. So for example, when I first moved to Chicago, I was basically the bed and breakfast for all of the state of Iowa, which is where I'm from. And so I had to create a policy. And the policy was, oh, we don't host guests for more than 3 nights. And we can never host more than 1 guest a month. And so I'm so sorry that we're not going to be able to accommodate you for your 2-week vacation in June. But you see, those are our policies. And people don't really know what to say when you do that. And it sounds much more official than you saying like, no, we don't want to host you. It's, oh no, it's, it's not you. It's just, that's kind of the policy we've taken to be fair to everyone. So encourage you to think about that, and then drawing boundaries, which I know we know is important, but we are not always good at. And think about what, if there's a policy or boundary that you need to draw and how that might be able to help you. Alrighty. Okay. I want to invite you on your worksheet to commit to having a hard conversation by Wednesday. And the reason I say Wednesday is because you want it to actually happen. My guess is that there's a hard conversation you've been putting off. So I'll give you a few seconds if you want to share that in the chat, or just put it down on your worksheet.
So yeah, so this is your invitation to be held accountable, which I think is also important when people have things that they want to do, especially when it's causing them some stress or anxiety. Having somebody try and hold you accountable to it helps you sometimes do what you need to do. So that's what this question is about. Is that right?
Definitely, exactly, yeah, and commit to yourself that you're actually going to do it. I think we often build up these hard conversations, just like tasks we're procrastinating, to be much bigger than they have to be. And so just doing it can be much more, it's more fair to the other person than you harboring the resentment and frustration, and it'll relieve a lot of mental space for you too. All right, now the last hack I want to talk about is get stuff done. What I mean by this is, as one of the parts of our, this is actually a picture of some of our mastermind members one time when we had Michelle Silverthorne as our guest, but part of our masterminds, we started offering get stuff done days where you log on to Zoom for 3.5 hours. You have prompts and sprints of 45 or 40 to 50 some minutes, and you never know how long a particular sprint is going to last. You have the accountability of other people on Zoom. No one's watching you, but you forget that, so you focus. And you have the camaraderie of other people who are working together in a 3.5 hour time period. I encourage you to, if you go to aposignup.com/GSD, you can sign up to be on the list of folks who get notices, because we don't send notices about them to our entire email list, because we do them a couple times a month, and we don't use, we try not to bother people with emails too often. So go to aposignup.com/GSD if you want to get an email about those, because we do offer some that are free for non-clients. There's actually one next Thursday morning. And if you try it and like it, you're welcome to come back to those, but it's also something you could do with your office, where everybody just agrees, okay, Thursday morning or whatever it is, Friday afternoon is our GSD time. And so no one's going to schedule anything else. We're really going to focus on getting things done. So it's a really, I've been amazed. I used to do this with law students, and now doing it with professionals. I'm amazed at how much more people get done, and also how much better they feel about their productivity when you have the right atmosphere created through these GSD days. So go to aposignup.com/GSD if you want to get on the email list for the free GSD days we offer. All right, so we talked about getting on top of your time, using systems that work for you, drawing boundaries, and getting stuff done. All right, so I encourage you to share your, we can't do a whiteboard because we're not in Zoom, but I encourage you to share your top
I think we do have a whiteboard.
Oh, can we? Oh, look at that. Oh, Trina, how do we do that? A whiteboard?
I know. Well,
maybe we should just do it in the chat for today.
Yeah, maybe we can explore that feature for the future.
Yeah, Yeah, so share, hopefully, ask you to share your top takeaway from today, and or if you have any questions in the chat.
Okay,
There's
so
my contact information. Feel free to reach out if I can be helpful.
thank you so much, Amy. And you are just a few minutes over time, which is totally okay with me in my attempt to be very stress-free about what's going on with today's
sure you got
tech
your full hour
problem.
of CLE.
You got it. I want to thank you personally for coming back. We always enjoyed and appreciate the knowledge that you have and are willing to share with us. For the viewers, thank you for taking time out on your Friday afternoon. These webinars, we are still doing them a little less often now that we are not in lockdown anymore, but we're doing them every other week. And we're still offering them for free to our friendly group members. So if you found value in this, please let others know that we continue to do these and that they can join through registration in our Facebook page or our Mighty Network page. And anybody can just contact me if they have questions about that. So to wrap things up, I want to wish you all a happy and stress-free weekend. And please join us in the future for another webinar. And we'll see if we can make your lives happy. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to close out.